Greetings and welcome to the latest edition of the Entheogenic Evolution podcast. As always, I'm your host, Martin, and I'm happy to have you with me today. For this week's episode, I am joined by relatively new author, Deva Arani, and she joined me last month to talk about her two forthcoming books. One is Integration Alchemy, and the other is The Mother Ache, and she shares her own personal story of how she got into working with psychedelic medicines, how she approaches integration as a work of embodiment and living what you learned through your psychedelic sessions. She had a lot to share. We had a great conversation, and we'll get into that in just a moment. But first, let's have a few announcements. As I do once a month, thanks to Brooke for making a monthly contribution in support of the Entheogenic Evolution podcast via PayPal. Thank you very much, Brooke. Always appreciate that. Also want to say thanks and welcome to two new supporters over at my Patreon page. That's patreon.com/MartinWBall. We've got Ryan and Livio. And Ryan signed up at the $20 a month level over there at Patreon, which gets him access to the full Entheogenic Evolution archive. So that's where old episodes go when they disappear from the active podcast feed. So they go over to the archive over at my Patreon page, and there's lots and lots of stuff that is no longer available anywhere else on the net, just over there at the archive that I have at the Patreon page. So anywhere from $20 and up, you get full access to that. You can spend a lot of time. There's a couple hundred hours worth of talks and interviews and materials from the podcast, some even going back to 2008 and 2009. 2010, 2011, some really old episodes over there, and lots of stuff from the in-between years. And again, when an episode is no longer active here on the podcast, I always delete from the back, and it goes over to my Patreon page. And of course, there's no obligation to Patreon. You can change your level of support at any time. You can join it for free. You can come at the $1 a month level. You can go all the way up to $100 a month, which also gets you a 1-hour monthly video call and check-in with me. You can also transfer that to other people, as has recently been done over the last week with one of my patrons. More than happy to accommodate you that way. And again, there's no obligation. You can join for as long as you want. You can change whenever you want, and you can cancel. Also, just remind you, you don't have to sign up over at Patreon. If you would like to have an integration call with me, just shoot me an email at martinwball@gmail.com, and I'm available for 30, 60, or 90-minute calls. And if you want more information about that, you can stop by at non-dualentheogenicintegration.com or just martinball.net. And of course, speaking of integration, I am continuing to promote my upcoming class with Mindscape Institute. I've got my 5-MeO DMT Integration Specialist training course. It starts on Wednesday, March 4th. I still have room in this class, and I have 3 scholarships available for $750 off the cost of tuition for the class. And of course, if you are a Mindscape alumni, you already get an automatic $500 discount on that. I've got information at my webpage at nondualentheogenicintegration.com. I'm happy to share the syllabus with anybody who might be curious and wants to read through what are the different weekly readings and assignments and topics that we're going to be looking at, what are the writing assignments, what are the supplementary materials. I've really put a lot of work into this class. I've got a lot of materials for students and looking forward to starting this next round, but there is still room. So if you'd like to join in, now's the time to take some action on that. You can just shoot me an email at martinwball@gmail.com if you want any more info. And let's see. Coming up on the Entheogenic Evolution podcast, what have we got going? Well, I've got Tracy Scott talking about Iboga. I've got an interview coming up this next week with author Jonathan Robinson on his book Ecstasy for Couples, who is a therapist who provides couples counseling with MDMA. And I've got Will Vandeveer coming up, also co-author of a new book on psychedelic therapy, presented from the perspective of a psychotherapist and where the groundbreaking work in psychotherapy is happening with psychedelics. So lots more great stuff coming up here on the podcast. I still do intend to share my talk that I gave in Reykjavik last month. That will probably be next week, so it might have to wait a little while before I get back into The Alchemist and the Eagle and sharing chapters from the Tales of Ardoin, just because I've got this material that I want to get out to you, the listening audience, in particular before my 5-MeO DMT integration specialist training class starts, because it's part of promoting the class and getting people excited about the materials that we cover in that course. Okay, well, I think that that's all that I have in terms of announcements. Let's get into this conversation with Deva Arani. Her website is devaarani.com, DevaArani.com, devaarani.com. And her books are Integration Alchemy and The Mother Egg. And we're going to hear all about it right here, right now on the Entheogenic Evolution podcast. Thanks for listening, and be back next week with more stuff for you to listen to. Well, I'm welcoming on to the Entheogenic Evolution podcast today, Arani Scheimer, and I'm excited that Arani has already shared that this is her very first podcast interview. So I'm excited to help break you into the podcast world. I know you've got some books that are coming up and going to be coming out soon. So this is a great way to help introduce you to a listening audience. So welcome to the Entheogenic Evolution, Arani.
Thank you so much for having me, Martin.
Yeah. Well, your introductory email that you sent definitely caught my attention. I liked some of the phrasing and wording that you had. You know, these days I get a lot of emails for being on the podcast, and something I'm increasingly getting more of is like emails from people that it's like, they don't talk about psychedelic medicine. It's like, why do you want to be on my podcast? But yours covered a lot of interesting bases. Some of the words that caught my mind or caught my eye were integration through embodiment, which is a really big thing for me, and I think it's not dealt with enough, right? That we take such a psychological approach often to psychedelics, like what are your insights, but not like how are you embodying it. So integration, embodiment, supporting people working through their process. So I think we've got a lot of interesting things to talk about today, but I want to start. I know you've been now listening to the podcast, so you're probably anticipating what I'm going to say next, is that I always like to start with inviting a new guest just to share about themselves and how they got into this field. Anything you want to share of your own personal story, this is the time and space where I welcome you to do that and let the listeners know who you are and what you're about.
Yeah, thank you. Well, for me, I didn't set out to experience psychedelics. I was on a very disciplined and intense inquiry into what it meant to be human in a spiritual context. And that started kind of by happenstance, accidentally, because when I turned 30, I started doing long distance running, and I found myself in these states of presence and kind of joy. And I knew we refer to it in the athletic, it's the runner's peak or the runner's high, right? And I was like, but this is a possibility within me. What does this actually mean? You know, how do I translate this? And that was my first kind of opening. And so then I started to get into more of an Eastern meditation practice. And I had a life that I was living that on the outside looked very good. I was a legal aid attorney. My husband was international marketing, and, you know, all the normal things that we seek in our culture. And inside, I was just dying. I thought, you know, this isn't actually me. You know, what am I doing with my life? So at some point, I started to try to bring my meditation and the understandings that were coming through for me into my life and my friendships and my relationship, and it wasn't translating. So I had to kind of let go. And it was a very, very scary time. People might refer to it as kind of the dark night of the soul. But what I understood was that I was living a life and it looked good on the outside, but on the inside, there was so much unprocessed pain and self-doubt and unhealed childhood trauma, and I was just suppressing it.
Yeah.
And so as I let go, doors started opening for healing, other more authentic healing. I'd been the psychology route, and I'd met with therapists, and I'd had antidepressants, and I had been met with a lot of sympathy, like, oh, you poor thing, you had such a terrible childhood. No wonder you're depressed. And it all was supportive in a way, but it felt like just a Band-Aid.
Mm.
And so when I let go of everything that was familiar, I was absolutely terrified and very, very much alone, because as you stop showing up in the way that people expect, they're not happy.
No.
They want you to continue to take care and be kind and have the parties. And when you're saying, well, I'm not really into that anymore, and then it's like they get uncomfortable. And so you end up in a place where it's like, who am I? What am I doing with my life? And so I was very fortunate in that I had the courage to step away and start, and the doors opened. And so I had a group process that I went to, which was a week-long intensive called the Path of Love, which then led me to go to India. And I spent some time at an ashram there, did a group called what's called Primal Therapy. And I just kept saying yes. And I was totally stepping outside of my box of who I thought I was. But at the same time, I was discovering that I didn't actually know who I was.
Yeah.
And I didn't actually have to worry about that. I just had to keep going, just keep saying yes. And so I had studied Gurdjieff sacred movements and a lot of different active meditation techniques, and had a lot of amazing teachers. And when the ayahuasca came through, my partner Samir and I were visiting a friend in California, and he was talking about his experience. It was his 60th birthday party, and he was quite stressed. And I was kind of like, oh, who is this guy? And I'm on the meditation course. This is, the hard work and discipline of my spiritual practice. I thought, oh, that's kind of sounds like cheating a little bit. But so I had a hard no. And it was the oddest thing, because on the plane ride home from California, I opened a memoir that I had been reading by Isabella Allende. And I had read it like 2 or 3 years ago and had a bookmark, opened it up to that page. And that chapter was about how she wanted to reconnect with her maternal lineage. She was from Chile, and her grandmothers were abuelas, because now she had grandchildren of her own. And so she went to Peru, and she had her ayahuasca journey. Mm-hmm. And I was sitting on the plane, and is this what Scott was inviting? And yes. And I was like, well, I'm going. Mm-hmm. Let's go. How do we sign up? So we went into a traditional dieta in Peru. And not knowing anything about psychedelics, really, I had been more of a studious, serious, kind of structured life. But it was just so clear when I read that passage, and I was sitting on the plane, and I had this huge yes. So I went on my first dieta, and I was so fortunate that I have such an incredibly impeccable, and I have had teachers who are connected to lineages. And so a dieta is where you go into the jungle and you spend 2 weeks and you have 5 ceremonies, and the rest of the time you're pretty much in isolation, 5 ceremonies with ayahuasca. And on that first dieta, I was blown away. And my first ceremony was so powerful and so strong. And it wasn't at all what I actually expected.
Yeah.
I could tell you a little. I don't know how much time we have. I could tell you a little bit about it.
Sure, yeah. We have as much time as you have, essentially.
Well,
So yeah, I always love hearing about people's first experiences. Since we have a little break in the conversation, I just first of all just want to thank you for sharing the story of moving from that comfortable old discomfort into like I need to find out who I am and what's really of value and important to me, and just how uncomfortable that process is and how hard it can be with the people who quote already think they know us and like, Arani, you're not being the way that you were. Like, why aren't you the way that you were anymore? And it takes a lot of courage and a lot of determination to do that, to step out of those old roles and to go on this quest for discovery. And I love how you've shared that following that yes. And even there, it doesn't mean that you're going to find the thing immediately, right? So you ended up in the ashram, and there's a little bit of spiritual judgment of like, well, I'm going to meditate. I'm going to do it on my own. Like those plant medicines are cheating. But then, when you actually get a chance to experience the plant medicines, you realize like, whoa, this isn't cheating, my man. This is hard work. There's a lot going on here.
this is the hero's path.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you actually are able to surrender to them, they're really strict teachers.
Yes. It's it's not cheating. It's
no
dialing up the
it's like
the dial.
Yeah, turning up the volume, turning up the heat.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. And I do think I can, if this helps anyone listening, that many of my friends and family thought that I had just lost my mind, and they were worried that she's in a deep depression, or maybe she's bipolar, and and all of this. And I was like, no, I'm actually just taking care of myself and setting boundaries. But that was so hard for people to hear. And I understand that. And I, with so much compassion, and many of those relationships are very different now, but it doesn't mean that those people are not in my life. Yeah. It's just, I meet them in a different way. So my first journey with the ayahuasca, it was kind of comical in a sense, because I was primed, and the shaman, the first hour or so, the medicine started to really come on, and you're in a maloka in the jungle, and it's dark, and he starts playing these traditional songs, and I can hear people purging, and my beloved partner Samir is purging, and I'm sitting there and nothing's happening, and I'm thinking, oh, am I going to miss? And so when he called for there's an opportunity to take more medicine, I like scooted up to the altar. And that's the last time I've ever gone up to the altar without trepidation. I was like, I'm missing you.
Yeah.
So after that second dose, I sat back, and it was like I was completely connected to something beyond time or mind that I immediately recognized. And the medicine took me to a place which I had completely forgotten about, which was when my maternal grandmother was dying. And I had been in the room, but there was another woman that I didn't actually know that was kind of hovering over a bed. And my grandmother asked for me, and I said, I'm here, Grandma. And then I started crying. And because I was crying and it was just so much, I was 18 years old, I left the room, and then she died. And I had so much grief because she was like the rock and the love, the true person in my childhood who actually I felt held by. But I didn't, and so in the medicine, in that first journey, I was there with her, and I was rubbing her feet because they were cold. And I was telling her how grateful I was. And I was thanking her, she had read all the Little House in the Prairie books to my brother and I, and all the, my whole journey with reading and literature and writing, it all started with her reading to us, and just so much love that she gave. And in this moment, I was there with her, and I was able to express my gratitude and love. And I had no idea that I needed that, or
Yeah.
that was a moment that stayed with me. But there I was. And then I found myself on the earth in the jungle, absolutely entwined with the Great Mother, or with the Divine Mother, or Pachamama, and held and loved and embraced. And my mother had abandoned me when I was 4 years old. So you can imagine the impact of realizing that I had this mother that had always been with me and always holding me.
Yeah.
And that all of my yeses, those were her doors that she was holding open. And so I was blown away. And also so much gratitude. And coming from that was just the first ceremony of the 5. Then the next day, you're sitting in your tombo waiting to go back to the Maloka, and you have a day, and then the fierce is there.
Yeah.
What is this? What is going on? Anyway, so that dieta was a turning point in my life, and it was a kind of a surprise. And we had scheduled that kind of spontaneously, as I described. After that dieta, we were already booked to go to India, and we spent several months in Dharamsala. And as part of that, when we got there, we were going to do 3 weeks with the Gurdjieff sacred movements, which is a form of meditation. And I thought, my mind, I thought, is it real? Is it not real?
Yeah.
People were saying, well, that's not really meditation, from my more Eastern community, and all this stuff, One day I was walking through Dharamsala, and I was listening to the sacred mantras, and I was looking at the Tonka paintings, and it all came together, and it just gelled, because it's all one. There's no separation. The mantras, the patterns, it's the same in the Himalayas as it is in the Amazon. It's the same vibration. It's the same energy. And I just stood there in the street in Dharamsala, and I started crying, and I thought, okay. So that was when I finally was able to say yes, and this path can be mine. The actual, how do I want to say this? The actual, everyone's path is going to be different, and each person is going to have their own doors opening. But for me, it provided the sense of reassurance that the journey is the journey, and we're so blessed to have these different opportunities, but there's no right or wrong, or this is better or worse, kind of the way the mind wants to define. And so after that, I could completely surrender that, yes, I'm a plant medicine person, and I'm going to go for it with all of my heart. It felt like that's when the permission really came through for me. And then it's been 20 some years.
Wow.
Counting, I don't know.
Well, thank you for sharing all of that. And that it's that internal permission that's the toughest one, right? Because we internalize all these things from all these other sources, and especially the ego, before it's really been deconstructed and healed and realigned, it wants to find what is that exterior source of authority that I can align myself with, that tells me I'm doing the right thing, I'm on the right path, or I'm being right, versus this lands in my heart in a way that feels true and valid and meaningful, and that I can accept that actually all of these things, that it's all part of the same thing, because it's all part of my journey, and it's my journey. It's not that person's journey, is not someone else's journey. It's not that authority's journey. And so it's that ongoing process of self-discovery. And I always like to emphasize the word process, which is what you've just shared here, that it was a process. It wasn't just one day the answers were clear. We'll try this, try that, maybe avoid that, but we'll try that. And then, there's fear, there's doubt, there's struggle. So it's this process. And it's by allowing ourselves to move through that process that we are able to reclaim, or maybe even initially claim for the first time, what really is true for ourselves and of value to ourselves. And so I congratulate you for moving along in that process and on that path.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been an incredible journey, and I'm so grateful. truly, I feel so blessed and I often, when I work with people in preparation or in integration, there isn't, I think as more and more psychedelics are becoming more mainstream, if you will, there's a kind of point that's being missed, which is that it's such a gift. And I don't know if you don't have to believe in reincarnation to understand the metaphor, that if you think of yourself as traveling through thousands and thousands of lives to get to the point where you have the opportunity to have this experience. And so you want to take it as sacred and take it as a gift and take it as something that you're also ready for, and that you've worked really hard to reach this point. And so you approach it with that intention and that gratitude and humility. It is a beautiful frame for the kind of work that we share. And now I want to make sure that message is coming across, because it becomes more and more available, and people are encouraging other people and recruiting and all of this stuff that's going on. It's like, whoa, slow down. This is truly sacred work.
Yeah. So I don't know if you've mentioned it here in the interview, but I think it definitely came up in our little pre-conversation that you're in Colorado now. So as you kind of stepped into the role of, I'm going to be a plant medicine person and also follow, these meditation practices and teachings, did you end up relocating to Colorado? And I'm asking because Colorado is a place where it's been fairly progressive, as here in Oregon, where I am, around psychedelic medicines and things like that. And so there's a lot of interest, there's a lot of access. But was that a place that you chose, or how'd you end up in Colorado?
I've always lived in Colorado. I was born in Colorado, and I went for all of my adult life, really, except for that period when I moved to a small town just an hour or so away. I've lived in the mountains above Boulder, Colorado. So it's definitely my home. I've traveled a lot, and I've spent a lot of time in different places, but I'm very connected to these mountains.
Yeah. Yeah.
I won't say attached because, but I feel like this is a good place for me. It suits me on all levels. And so, no.
Yeah. So just it's sort of a geological question. Do you feel a little weird when you go a place where it's really flat and you can't see mountains? Is that at all odd for you? And I ask because I've been West Coast person my entire life, and like the first time I flew across the country, and after we flew over Colorado, we hit the plains, and I'm looking out the window, it's like, oh my God, it's so flat down there. There's nothing. It's like, I don't think I could live somewhere that's just flat. Like, I want mountains.
Yeah. I think I love to go to the ocean, and I could spend hours on the beach and walking on the beaches and stuff, but there is something about the hiking in the mountains and being in the mountains that is very nurturing for me. But in terms of just orientation, where I live, it's like I know my directions are based on the mountains. The mountains are west, and so that's east, and this is that,
Yeah.
It's a very different kind of thing when you're in visit Indiana, for instance, and it's like, well,
yeah.
how do I know which way is west? What's going on here, So, and I felt very blessed to live in the mountains, and I know that also nature is a huge part of my life, and it's been very, very healing for me, and so connecting with nature is so important, and I have it out I'm looking out at the mountains, right, or the aspen trees and the birds right now. And so that's another just blessing in my life. And I encourage people, however they can, to connect wherever they are with nature.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to maybe move on to the next phase of the story now. I'm very interested in hearing, because this is the next interesting development, as I would identify it, is moving from someone who is pursuing their own personal transformation and healing and finding their own authenticity with plant medicines, with meditation, spirituality, whatever the tools may be, moving into the role of offering preparation and integration, and also in our pre-conversation, you mentioned taking people to Peru to work with the shamans within that particular lineage. I'm curious to hear that phase of the story of how that role from it being personal for you to being something that you wanted to share and kind of build a life around. How was that for you, and how did that develop?
Well, it developed on its own, in the sense that when I started working with the sacred plants, my intention was always about my own healing and my own work, and showing up and making sure that I was giving 100% effort from my own journey, which, as you know, I'm sure it takes a lot of courage. It's like, okay, I'm going to go to the altar and I'm going to take my full dose. Yeah. My hands may be shaking, but if I think I need more, so it was really, I really singled into my intention of healing and becoming the best possible version of me, the most awake, the most aware, the most present, whatever you want to call that. And then a few years into the journey, we were asked to start supporting people by our guide. So it came always as an invitation to step in a little more and a little more. We were never grasping or seeking. And I guess when the invitation appeared, it was always a yes. And I guess an analogy would be, for instance, I'm not a musician, but I have an incredible voice in ceremony now. Now, how did that unfold? Well, one night after a ceremony, our beloved shaman said, "Arani, when are you going to sing?" Mm-hmm. And I said, "Well, I don't know, maybe someday." This was maybe a year or two into my journey with the medicine. And he said, "Someday, how about tomorrow night?" And I literally laughed, and I thought he was joking, right? And the next night he came very early on, way before the normal sharing, and he asked me to sing. And I sang, and the song was there, and it came through the medicine. Yeah. So when I sing in ceremony, it's my voice, yes, but it's also the medicine that's coming. The medicine is coming through me. And so the same thing with supporting people. It was kind of the same thing where, okay, for the integration sessions, I never put up a sign that said, "Hello, I can help you with your integration." I started getting a call or an email that said, "Hey, I'd like to, is it possible that you could sit with me for a little bit? I'm really struggling with this or that." And of course, yes, I would be happy to sit with you. And so I guess it's been an unfolding of just being invited and then stepping into, and being invited and stepping into. So the idea of all of the way this has unfolded was never intentional. Mm-hmm. In the sense that, I think I want to train and be a shaman now, or, I'm going to become a psychedelic, whatever you want to call it. It just sort of took on its own kind of energetic momentum, if you will.
So what you shared just there brought up a question about embodiment for me. So going back to being that long distance runner and entering into those flow states of getting that runner's high, which I've not been a runner. I've never experienced that. For me, in my early experiences, I would say it came through with music, that there were times where I'd be playing guitar And like 15 minutes later, I'd be like, I don't know how I did what I think I just did, what I heard. Like something happened there.
Yeah.
So, and being asked to step into the role of singing, and I knew you were going to say like, "How about tomorrow night?" I knew that was the answer, or that was going to be the question. How would you compare that to the flow state of the runner's high? Did you make a connection there in your own mind? I guess what I'm kind of asking is, how did that feel? Because this is something I'm definitely very familiar with, and I'm sure many listeners are, but maybe some aren't, of that idea of when the medicine is flowing and that energy is open, that people they sing, or sometimes it's just speaking, or it might even just be body movements that are taking place, or sometimes with musicians. I used to attend the Santo Daime church here in Ashland, and everybody's drinking their daime, they're drinking ayahuasca, and then they're playing their instruments. And I would talk to them sometimes, and they'd say, yeah, like, I don't know how I played last night, but man, I sure played. It happened. So this is part of the phenomenon of working with these medicines. So I'm curious if you have more that you could share about what that first experience like really felt like, and how, if and how you connected that with the idea of the embodiment of through the running in that flow state. So I turn it back over to you any way you'd want to address that. I'm curious.
Well, it's really meditation, right? And so what I experienced in those long distance runs was actually the state of meditation. Like when you start running, and it's like, I'm going to run 3 miles, and how far have I gone, and how am I going, right? That this is the mind. But after training for a while, and you're running for 2 hours, 2.5 hours, your body has adjusted, so you have a muscle memory of these long runs. Then, well, this was 30 years ago now, but that muscle memory allows the nervous system to relax, because it's done this before. So the first time you try to run 2.5 hours, you're like, oh my God, should I drink more? But eventually you have a muscle memory that builds up. And that allows the nervous system to relax. And then there is the flow of the body, and there is the posture of the running that is supportive of flow. And you learn that movement and that rhythm. And ultimately the mind relaxes because the nervous system is relaxed. And pretty soon you're just like, you're running, and you're present with the path and the trail and the tree and the brook. And it's just like such a beautiful state of being. But it's actually, if we were going to coin it, it's meditation. And so ultimately, my understanding of entheogenic experiences is that it opens a window and allows access to that. And it's a teaching moment where this is a possibility within you. How are you going to carry this forward in your life? Yeah. So that's one. And then two, singing in the voice in that ceremony. I didn't take charge. I heard the voice say, can you sing now? And I stayed out of the way. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't in my mind. I was in my heart and in my navel. And from that place, I didn't know any medicine songs at the time. From that place, the song that Green Tara, is kind of a beloved of mine, if you will, then her song just rose through me. And there I was. It was a very simple mantra, Tara tutere ture. So, and I sang it, but it came from this words are so difficult, but it came from a place inside of me that was, I want to say, my true voice. Mm. And what I mean by that is it came from devotion and just the sense of love and offering and reciprocity. And it wasn't very long but the vibration of it was so powerful because this ego mind, me, my identity, wasn't in the way.
Right.
And that's the gift of the entheogenic experience, is that you can have that shift where you realize that you're not that important. Like you're a part of something that's so much bigger than you. So you don't have to worry about carrying the load or fixing the problems. Just relax and be a part of through presence, if you will, if that makes sense. So I don't know if that answers your question, but
yeah, well,
it's too long. So
I think it touches on that sense of being played by the energies, that when we have the ability or the capacity to get out of our own way and then allow what is already arising within us, that we don't have to know what it is, we don't have to direct it, we don't have to have a plan or agenda, but it is our job is to be the vehicle to allow this energetic expression. And for me, the body is the nexus that allows that to take place, because it comes from inside and gets moved out, and then it is joined into the orchestra of all the energies of reality that are taking place, and it's effortless, and it's these beautiful moments that I really love. Those kinds of experiences, when I have them, I love them when other people have them. I love when I'm able to witness or participate in them, because they're magical. They're very, very magical in that sense.
Yeah, they truly are magical, and they're, in a way, it's like, what a miracle to have that experience. And yet it's not a miracle at all, because it's everywhere all the time.
Right.
And that's where the integration comes, where do you have the discipline to actually embody that understanding, even if it's just for 1 second or 10 seconds in one day, and then, another day or this or that. But it's the longing to embody that is so important. And it's like your experience with, my experience with entheogens is that this is a possibility within me. Yes, there's an understanding that underneath all the layers that this altered reality is actually reality. But how do I actually live that when I have to go to work or feed my dog or, dash down and deal with all the news and the devices? So
yeah. And that's where we get into the question of embodiment. And that's where it's different than understanding or insight in a psychological sense, because it is that question of how do I live it as an embodied experience wherever I take my body, whether it's to the family, to the work, to the bathroom, to the kitchen, that I'm in this experience, these energies are present. So can I continue that process of getting out of my own way so that I can be really tapped into where my energy authentically is and let that express through me as a vehicle for this great orchestra of reality to place. Right. So this is where I think sometimes people get lost in the psychedelic world, because there can be the attachment to, well, the next cup or the next ceremony, or regular life is so hard and so messy. I just want to get back into the maloka. I want to get back in the teepee. I want to have my next ceremony. But this is the question of not how do I get back into the ceremony, but how do I bring the ceremony into everything as that lived embodied experience? So how did that embodiment and that understanding, how did that start to shape and form for you? I guess I'll leave it there. I don't need to add more to that. How was that for you?
I'll answer, and it's a two-pronged answer again.
Okay.
The first part of that is that I had already been working deeply with embodiment. I've practiced Kundalini yoga many, many years, and that's all about breath work, strengthening the navel, a lot of connecting. And so in Kundalini yoga, the teaching is that we have 3 centers of intelligence: our navel center, which is where we develop our discipline, and it's also where our fire and our courage lives. and our heart. This is our center where it's fluid, our emotions. And then we have our mind, and we have our mind that is like what I call the periphery mind, but we also have the subtle neutral mind, which is that place of meditation that we were talking about earlier. So how do we access that subtle neutral mind? Through the body. It's like the body is a back door. When you have connection with your navel and your heart energy is flowing, then the subtle neutral mind can literally bloom and in a more supportive way. And so without that embodiment, how do you access the subtle neutral mind? It's like you're trying to access meditation without watering the roots of the plant, so to speak. So for me, in my journey, I've had a lot of like Osho active meditations. There's dynamic meditation, Kundalini meditation. A lot of his meditations start by moving energy. So Kundalini meditation, for instance, you start with 15 minutes of shaking, and then you move into movement or dance. And the instruction is very clear. Maybe you start with the intention with your mind that I'm thinking, I'm shaking, I'm shaking. The idea is to allow the body to take over. And only after that 30 minutes of movement do you come into sitting into stillness. So you've actually moved your energy. You're connected to your body because your body's been guiding. And then there's an opportunity to allow you've released, and you can allow that more subtle, neutral, meditative mind to have space, actually, if you will. And then in terms of so my embodiment journey came kind of before the medicine. I would say, I think in my second book that I just wrote, it's an interesting thing, but at one point, I was, writing away, and I am reflecting back, and I said, I realized that every meditation or journey or healing or whatever, it's always been bringing me back and pointing me back to embodiment and to being in my body. All of my healing, all of the journey that I've been on, it's really about embodying and being in touch with this here now. So in terms of my own journey with helping people started coming to me for sessions. My partner is a psychotherapist. Many of my friends are group leaders and therapists and, somatic experiencing. And so I have like this whole background going on. But after a while, having so many sessions, I thought, well, I actually could use some tools. And I had the tools that I had used on my own journey. But I actually took a course, a year-long professional training called Compassionate Inquiry with Dr. Gabor Mate, and Satdaram Kaur. And it was fascinating. And it's like learning a language that you already know, but it put it into a structured setting to work with and help with people. And the way Dr. Mate works with people in healing, it's not about the mind, it's about what's happening in the body now. And then the question is, if you can get the person to access, I feel, okay, so here I'm a compassionate inquiry facilitator. And if I were to ask myself or a client, what's happening in the body now? And the client is saying, well, I have a lot of tension in my neck and shoulders. And so the first thing is to get them to actually have a sense that that's happening, because we're so blocked from our bodies that we don't even recognize our own pain until it becomes enormous. And then that once they start to be able to feel the sensations and stuff, the next step is to trace that back. And so the question is, in a guided compassionate inquiry, is like, how far back does that sensation go? And sometimes it'll bring the person right into a place. Well, I was 5 years old and my parents were fighting. And I remember, and so that's how the healing occurs. It heals. The body remembers. The body knows and holds what the young child couldn't process, was unable to, didn't have the capacity or the support. And so the healing actually happens with one foot in the present and one foot tracing back and actually not, I don't want to say reliving, but actually being able to process that pain that went untended. So the embodiment is huge in the healing, but it's also huge in just the sense of, if you want to be present, if you want to have that sense of responsiveness rather than reactivity, well, that's an embodiment. None of this is like, we're not figuring this out with our minds, because our minds are so tricky. They fluctuate. In the morning, it's like, oh, I had the best experience. And by the evening, it's like, oh my God, that was like horrible. And the mind is always going to be waffling back and forth. And that's why the body is actually the one who has the wisdom and actually knows, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. In your own experience, going back to that first ayahuasca session of you being a child and your grandmother, I'm curious, were you able to identify a place in your body where that was being held? Or maybe it was the entire body. I'm thinking of your statement of feeling lying in the jungle being held by Pachamama, by the great mother, which is kind of an all over body sensation, right? That nice coveriness, like you are home. It was
emerging. It was just like, that's like, wow. And in the space of I was so there and so present with my grandmother. I mean, I feel her cold feet and rubbing them and sense the warmth. And my understanding of that, what really opened for me there was my heart. Mm-hmm. And I had shut down my heart because it was so painful. So that allowed me to kind of process her death in a way that a college student would. But also, when I shut down my heart to avoid the pain of that loss, I also lost connection with that love and with that gratitude and that deep sense that I come from this woman who is so strong and so brave and so loving, So for me, in that experience, it was my heart that had been shut down, and to have that kind of open and to feel, I could feel the hurt, but I could also feel the love and the gratitude and the sense of just like, this is my grandmother and she held me and loved me in a way. And I forgot. And now I'm being the gift of realizing how precious that love was and what it actually meant to me when I was just this lost little being kind of on my own, if you will. So for me, in that sense, in that experience, it was about the heart.
Yeah. And even there, the pain can be a gateway to gratitude, right? Because it's the pain of recognizing the loss, which emphasizes the importance of what you had and what you gained from that. So the pain is such an integral part of it. Like, so, that the embodied experience, it comes with both pleasure and pain. It's support and comfort and fear and isolation. It comes with all of these things. And so using these different emotional resonances to get into the deeper state of gratitude that, when we love life, we have to love both the pain and suffering of life and also the beauty and the joy and the wonder of it, because it's all part of it.
Exactly. And the sad thing is that when, excuse me, I have a little bit of a cold that I'm getting over. The sad thing is when we're small and we cut off our feelings because they're too much. So I'm not allowed to feel my anger or express my anger. Well, then there goes your passion and your fire and your creativity too, right? And I'm not allowed to share my grief. I'm not allowed to cry. Well, then there goes your capacity for joy. So my understanding from sort of my own experience and also from very wise teachers is that our capacity to feel our joy, our creativity is equal to our experience to feel the painful emotions. But we cut off ourselves from the painful emotions, and we distract ourselves with whatever, whether it's the device or eating, whatever it is to distract and avoid the pain. What we don't realize is that then we're also cutting off our capacity for the beauty and the awe and the joy. And so for me, that's kind of what, if you want an integration in a nutshell, is the capacity to find the balance and hold both, because it's never one or the other. Life is and so we have to be able to go back and reclaim our grief, reclaim our anger, reclaim whatever it is that we're blocking. And then that's what allows access to the joy, the creativity, the flow. Because it's one energy, right?
Yeah.
And so if we're blocking here, if we have one life force energy and we're expending that energy blocking because it's too hard and it's too painful, and that's what we've been conditioned to do, well, that life force energy is not over here with the creativity and the flow and the yes. So,
yeah. So I think this may be a good place to move more specifically into the topic of integration. And I believe this is one of your books that's going to be coming out is around this topic of integration. It's a word that gets used more and more in the psychedelic world these days. Everybody's got to have integration. And I always like to kind of ask, when the topic comes up, is like, well, what does it mean for you? And I think you've already told us a bit about what it means for you, but maybe if we could just be more explicit around this topic of integration. And I know that you provide integration sessions with clients, and I'm curious to hear anything you'd want to share about what does that involve? What does that look like? And again, from this understanding that integration means a lot of different things to a lot of different people in the psychedelic space. So I'm very curious on your particular approach.
Well, that is, it is a big topic, and it's becoming a trend, isn't it? Like, well, integration is, when we started all of this 20 years ago, integration wasn't even a word in the field,
Right.
It was like, what does that mean? And for me personally, when I first started working with people, it wasn't an integration session per se. It was like, I'm really struggling. Could you meet with me? Or I could use some help, or all of, it was more based on just need and willingness to provide support and presence for fellow travelers. And must have been about maybe 7 years ago, I confess, I was getting I had a little bit of an agenda, because I felt like that problem that you named of people that were just reaching for more peak experiences but weren't doing the homework, it was manifesting a lot in my field. And so I thought, sitting with people and encouraging them to actually do work outside of that peak experience and actually show up with meditation or whatever that might look like for them. It's hard. That's the hard part. So I wrote a book on integration, and I didn't talk at all about my entheogenic experiences. I framed it in like a spiritual retreat. Don't come back from your yoga retreat. And I think that it helped a lot of people, but I also took it off the market because it wasn't kind of my true voice or true understanding. It was like that life coach, let's do yoga. And so the second book on integration, which is coming out next month, I was actually approached by a publisher. I'm writing a book on the mother-daughter relationship and mother-daughter healing. And I had signed that contract, and then the editor said, we want to meet with you. It's like, oh, okay. So we had a Zoom call with the owner of the publishing company and the editor. and they said, we want to talk to you about this integration book. Would you consider rewriting it? And I said, yes, I would. And how would you make it different? And what I said, well, I would speak from my own voice and from my own authority and have to frame it in such a way that it felt like a reciprocity for what I received. And they said, well, we want you to write that book. I was like, oh no. So here I am on your podcast. But basically what I think I thought I was just going to rewrite the old book, but I ended up writing a completely new book. And when I think about integration, I think about wholeness. And what I mean by that is finding that balance within of we're all human. We're all on a journey. We all are showing up the best that we can. And each person's journey is going to look different. But integration is kind of the balance between, I don't want to get too scientific, but it's a balance between the masculine and the feminine and the light and the dark and joy and sorrow. And it's finding kind of the ability to come from a place of presence rather than reactivity. And in my book, we start with the practical chopping wood and carrying water. Like, are you actually taking care of your house and your bills and your responsibilities? And then it's like, are you resting, and are you eating, and are you taking care of your body? This is integration. It's like chopping wood and carrying water. And then, like, what are the possibilities for you to be in nature or connect or meditate or all of the more spiritual things? Everyone's journey is going to look different, but there's a sense of an integration. It's like coming from a place of authenticity, of wholeness, of truth. All of these are just words, and everyone is going to have a different understanding of what I'm trying to say. But it's really finding a balance within yourself that is aligned to the whole. So it's within and without, right? But it always starts within. Once you start aligning in your own being, then it's natural that you're going to align outside of your being.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. And it sounds like your description of version 1 of the book versus version 2 of the book is an illustration of exactly what you're talking about. That version 1 was not really in alignment with your authentic voice, and then getting this opportunity to redo it, that you were able to bring it into alignment. I would imagine that was very satisfying for you to be able to do that.
It was very satisfying, and also it was very scary because, well, I don't want to, scary is a big word, but it required me to step fully into who I am as a sacred plant person in a new way. I've been very private about my journey. And so, yes, it's an opportunity to share, and I do share about my journey in the book. And it also, there's a vulnerability, like, oh my God. Yeah. When in the old school days, we never talked about psychedelics. It was all very much like going to South America, and my mom would say, well, she still says, well, you're going to Peru again, whatever. But so there was a vulnerability, but also it was such a clear yes. And I actually talked to my guides in South America, and I got a very clear yes from them that they thought that it would be helpful. And so really, ultimately, I've had such the medicine, the sacred plants have been such a gift in my life, my healing. So I would like to reciprocate. And it turns out that I was invited to write this book. And so the book is, I set out with the intention that this is reciprocity. So let me share from my heart. Let me share my truth. And so I think we'll see how it's received. And actually, the truth is, it doesn't matter how it's received, because this is my process of my journey, and it's my gift. So I'm not seeking anything in return. I'm just, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. That's part of the whole process of accepting our own authenticity, is letting go of how it is received, because it's not done in order to receive something in particular. It's actually done in order to give yourself the opportunity to be that authentic voice, whatever that may be. And we can't control what other people are going to think of that or how they will receive it. But when we know that I have acted from my most authentic intention, then we can live in a way that I personally find deeply satisfying and meaningful. And to have that opportunity to express ourselves, I just think is so valuable. And it's still a question for a lot of people. I mean, I've had people on the podcast who said, yeah, well, I wanted to write this book and, include all my medicine experiences in there because this is how I formed this book, but my editors didn't want me to do it, or I had to think about what my job is going to be, or, what my boss might say. And I've even had a few guests on where they've switched jobs and said, okay, well, can you remove the podcast because I don't want that. I don't want the information out there. And then, you can put it back up now. So it's still a reality for a lot of people, even though plant medicines have gained much more widespread acceptance and far more cultural interest. I like to share that when I started this podcast, 18 years ago, it was the kind of thing where, people ask me, what's your podcast about? And I say, it's about psychedelic medicines. Everybody would giggle, right? They'd go,
really?
Yeah. You're like, yeah, we did that back in the day. But it made, just the topic made people uncomfortable. But now, especially like where you and I live, in both in Colorado and in Oregon. I mean, you could talk about psychedelic medicines. I talk about it with the other parents at my kids' school. They all know what I do. Nobody giggles. Nobody bats an eye. Nobody's like, oh, you're into that weird stuff. But it's different in different parts of the country or different parts of the world. So it still can be edgy for people.
Yeah. It can be edgy, and I think always there's a sense of, okay, here's another component that we haven't discussed, not necessarily in relation to the book, but I feel like everybody has their own journey. And so I feel a deep responsibility that if I am talking about my experience, and I'm doing it in such a way that it doesn't feel like I'm recruiting people.
Yeah.
And so when anyone is coming to me and saying, well, do you think I should or should I not? I'm always directing that question back to them. Like, I don't have an opinion. This is your journey. This is your opportunity. I can direct them to their body and say, well, what are you experiencing in your body? What are you thinking, and help them form that decision or start to work toward a decision. But everyone is... So the idea of recruiting or encouraging people to do psychedelics, so many people are like, oh, I really wish my friend would do this, or I know my dad would benefit from this. Can I, and it's like, yeah, we're not, we would wish that everyone would heal and everyone would become more whole. And, you can share of your journey, but if you're saying, I really think you should do this, then for me, it's another line that's being crossed. There's always the invitation, and always the timing is going to be right. And in my world, the understanding is that the sacred plants are actually in charge. And so the people who are coming with us, for instance, down to Peru, I'm just a sacred butler, and I'm not telling them they should come or should not come. I certainly can tell them what to pack and how to prepare and maybe think about an intention. But I think we're not in charge, actually, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. And I think that that's very important. That's definitely something I advise people on as well. As I encourage them, like, speak about your experience, speak about what you've gained from it, speak about your enthusiasm and your love for the experience and the process, but don't ever tell anybody else, I think you should do it. And let them
Yeah,
ask you, let them ask, like, hey, I'm interested. Can you tell me more? And then I say, well, there's the opening. And but still,
exactly.
it's got to be everyone's decision, because the last thing you want, for one, I think all of us who are, cultivating that sovereign sense of authenticity within ourselves, that we don't want other people telling us what to do, and so we shouldn't be telling other people what to do. And that
Exactly.
when I make a decision, I want it to be because I've made the decision, not because I think somebody else thinks it's a good decision for me to make. And I want to offer that same gift to everybody else, that you get to make your own choices. You get the consequences of that. And that is your sovereign action as an embodiment of the universal consciousness and being that is having this human experience. It's up to you. And not even God can tell you what to do, because it's all just you in the end. It's up to you to make your choice, and then let these inspirations guide us and center in on our heart and see, where does my heart truly open and where does my heart say yes. And well, then if you have that awareness within yourself, then that's probably the thing you want to pursue. But it's got to be your
Exactly.
choice. Yeah.
Yeah. And that speaks to another important point about integration, is that people have these experiences and they go to their loved ones or their friends or their family and they share about these experiences. And oftentimes that's met with a lot of reserve or skepticism. And that can be very painful for the person who's saying, my life, I've
Yeah.
changed. And so to know also that people are not rejecting your experience, but people aren't necessarily, not everybody is ready to understand what it actually implies, if you will, in terms of their own journey.
Yeah.
And everyone is kind of on their own path. And so to kind of be mindful and discerning about what you're sharing and who you're sharing with, because a lot of people start the integration with, well, I tried to talk to so-and-so and it just felt like they slammed the door in my face, or they, I'm like, yeah, well, okay. So let's start there. What was your, intention in sharing? And let's turn it back to what's actually happening with you and what was happening with you. But anyway, that's just
Yeah.
a side that.
And I think that points to a significant part of what integration is. I work as an integration specialist primarily with 5-MeO DMT. And a big part of my role is having conversations with people and just letting them share their experience. And you can just see the sense of relief where they're like, oh, he gets what I'm talking about. And that's really all they want.
Exactly.
They just want to be able to share and have someone say, oh, yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah.
Exactly. It's so important. And if
Yeah.
the audience is saying, that sounds crazy, then it's like, it, so, but yeah, I do think just having someone listen and witness your journey from a space of understanding is hugely important. And that's why when you're choosing someone to help you integrate, it's important that you have discernment and know that that person is actually experienced, not in psychological therapy training, but in actual having had the experience of working in the medicines deeply, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah.
Same with guiding, but.
Yeah. And I mean, it makes such a big difference that, again, I have clients that say, well, yeah, I talked to my psychotherapist about this, and they started looking at me like, whoa, we got to get you on some meds or something. And then they
Yes.
come and they share the same story to me. And it's like, oh, yeah, that's totally normal. Yeah. Yeah. I get it. That's normal.
Exactly. And that's another thing is, I think in my book in the back, I have preparation for the journey or somewhere. Anyway, the point is that if you're seeking support through a therapist for psychedelic experiences, you want to make sure that the person you're talking to has some understanding through having had psychedelic experiences. It's a little bit tricky, I know, but I mean, it's important that when you're describing this state, that the person has some understanding or resonance of what you're actually experiencing, because otherwise then it just becomes a part of that diagnostic manual and
right.
This isn't real, or
Yeah.
this is avoidance, or
hearing
whatever.
voices. Let's look that one up. Like, oh, okay.
Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So I think having that direct experience is so important, and providing that space where, again, that's a big part of integration, is just letting people be heard and seen, and having their experience validated and reaffirmed, and know that they're not crazy. Yes, I understand. That does so much for people. As you say, like going and talking to friends or family, a lot of times you are going to be met with like, what are you doing? Or that's crazy. Or even, I'm worried about you. I'm worried for you.
Exactly.
There can be a lot of judgment and just a lot of misunderstanding. So having a supportive, empathetic space to express oneself is vitally important. And it definitely sounds like you work on providing that for your own clients, and have included that in your book. I would like to invite you to share, you've mentioned it now, but let's hear a little bit more about the other book, about the mother-daughter relationship. And I'm very curious about the genesis of that book, and what kind of territory that gets into, which that would not be my experience. Obviously, masculine body, not having the mother-daughter thing.
Oh, that's funny. Well, it's interesting because after I took my compassionate inquiry training for the year, and I thought, this is going to give me better tools to help people who are coming to me for integration. Well, there was kind of a shift energetically in the field of people who were coming from me, and no matter where we started, whether it's I just want to talk to you because I'm having trouble sleeping or whatever, it was like it always came back to something about their relationship with their mother. And so I got more curious about it, and it felt like, I signed up for a class, and in the class they started talking about a book about the mother-daughter wound, and I was thinking, that's weird, because here, and so it just started to become more and more on my radar. And in my own journey, I think my mother was a young mother, and when I was 4, she ran off to Texas and left my brother and I with our father. And so healing that has been a big part of my life. And I mean, she came back when I was in high school, but she didn't come back as a mother. She came back kind of as the mother that I needed, if you will. So, and then in my adult life, there was a lot of difficulty, if you will. And so when I left, when I described that earlier in the podcast, where I had to take a break from friends and divorce, and also as a part of that, I set a boundary with my mother. It was easy because I said, I'm getting divorced. I can't, I'm not joining you shopping or whatever. And she said, well, you'll never afford health insurance. And I thought, okay, this is who she is. This has been, when I got a scholarship to law school, she said, well, I hope you don't become one of those Hillary Clinton. This was back in the day. And I thought, okay, so I've always been able to understand that we have different political beliefs. But I took a break several years, and eventually met with her with an elder therapist, and we set a new parameter for our relationship. And she had been so hurt that I'd cut her off that she was actually able to hear me. And I think what I said was that, I just need you to love me, and I just want to love you. And I want to put aside all of this other, all of these other voices. And she actually, I mean, it's been a work in progress, but that's our general understanding. So I have the experience of healing my own mother ache and pain, and all of these women coming to me. And so I sent an email asking for I decided, okay, well, this is where my practice wants to go. So how am I going to do this? And I was in my sadhana one morning, and I thought, I just need to send an email to a few of the women I've worked with and ask them to write testimonials. And then that email moved energetically. And before I knew it, I had a meeting with an editor who said, I want to talk to you about this book. I said that I was writing another book. So the book kind of came through the back door, if you will. And the thing about the childhood trauma or the pain of any childhood is that this is actually healing it. My understanding is this is a part of the spiritual evolution and the journey of the individual. And there's an understanding, it's a Sufi teaching that says that by the Great Mother, we're entrusted with a certain amount of the world's pain. And we're endowed with the capacity to heal that. Mm. And so then the question becomes one of showing up in agency and taking responsibility for your own healing journey. And so I was able to do that with my mother. And part of that is letting go of the expectation that she's ever going to change or she's going to be the mom finally that I want, accepting her and loving her for who she is, but also then the empathy and compassion of actually understanding what she went through as a child. Mm-hmm. And it's a lineage based. The maternal wound is a lineage based. When we heal the maternal wound, and it's not just women, it's men too, then we're also healing our relationship with, well, it starts with self-connection, but also then we can connect with the earth in a way that allows us to become more stewards and less consumers, if you will. And it has a ripple effect. And so I guess in my small kind of window of the world, it's another offering of reciprocity, that if we can start to work with our maternal lineage, there's a ripple effect that goes back and forward through time. And it allows us to reconnect with ourselves in a way. And when we reconnect with ourselves, then we're able to connect more authentically with our friends or our family. And then so really I'm all about energetic ripple effects and how to help, because people are struggling. It's a hard time. So.
Yeah. So it makes me think of the question of, throughout all this process and moving from this older, or really, I should say younger version of you, the previous version of you that had, from the outside, everything should be perfect, but inside it's not. And then moving into this state of alignment between your inner and outer worlds and finding your voice and finding ways that you want to give back and reciprocate and be of service. How has that transformed this inner transformation? How has that transformed your relationships in general, when within your life, and your sense of satisfaction of being yourself?
Well, that's a good question. I think I have people in my life who are also seeking healing and authenticity. It seems, I guess you could call it the law of attraction, like attracts like, and that's been a gift. And they're my teachers, and they're my friends, and they're my fellow travelers, and people that are like, let's take my mom, for instance. She has, she has her own life. She's a very devout Christian, very conservative, all of the things. And yet I approach her with my open heart and my love and my authenticity, and she reciprocates that. And when in healing our relationship, it was very healing for her, because she had also had a pretty hard childhood, but also just the of having left her children and all of the process. And so in healing that, she now is a much more open and loving woman. And it shows up in a different way. She's the greeter at her church, for instance. And I'm very happy and proud of who she is and how she moves in the world. She says it's easier to greet someone with a smile than a frown, or, and I think, well, that's beautiful. And this is like our authentic connection is beautiful and meaningful. We don't have to agree on almost anything except the fact that we love each other and we both want to be kind to others, whatever you want to call it. So, and then my connections with some of my older friends from the past, for a while, it felt like they kind of disappeared, but many of them have trickled back into my life in various ways. And I had lunch with a couple of old friends from, we could call it the before, last year. And it was really sweet and precious just to catch up on how they are and how their lives are unfolding. No expectation or agenda, just caring. And I think they appreciated that. But I would say overall, in general, I have less people in my life. I'm not surrounded. I used to be so popular, big parties and all the friends, but I have less, more quiet, but more meaningful. And it's beautiful. And I have a lot of alone time, and I live with a man, Samir, who's been a seeker on his spiritual path for a very long time. He started in his 20s, late 20s, and he's 78 now. Spent a lot of time in India, Osho, all the things. And so in that sense, I guess I feel very blessed. But also there's something, and I write about this in both of my books, about setting boundaries and making sure, like if you're spending time with someone and you walk away and you feel like drained or exhausted or kind of like somebody just dumped their process on you, well, then you might evaluate how this relationship actually works in your life. What are you getting out of it, and how can you restructure it so that it's not? Because oftentimes we give ourselves away because we don't know how to not, because we're conditioned to, oh yes, of course, but the truth is the no is the most self-loving. Like, no, I really don't have time to meet you. I'm sorry. And then the person can do with that what they will.
Yeah.
But we're not enabling them anymore.
Right.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So it sounds like a movement into greater quality, not necessarily greater quantity in terms of friends, events, things, but really maximizing the sense of quality and maintaining that sense of authenticity and connection, and then also boundaries, right? Because that's the other side of connection, is establishing proper boundaries. And that's another one that a lot of people have difficulty with. I've had difficulty with that in my life. Creating boundaries was one of the greatest things I ever did.
Yeah. And it is hard.
Yeah.
Because we feel like if we're saying no, we're risking losing that person or that relationship. But no, actually what you're risking is losing that person's energy charge that might not be helpful. You can't lose what you don't have. So, if you...
Yeah. Well, Arani, thank you for sharing so much in our conversation today. When are the books coming out? I know that they're coming out soon, and I think one might be out by the time this interview comes out, and maybe the next one will be out shortly thereafter. I'm just imagining this will be out sometime mid-February. But yeah, when are they coming out?
The first book is called Integration Alchemy, and it's The Real Ceremony is Your Life, which is kind of what we've been talking about. That's coming out February 17th, and you can pre-order it now. And the second book is called The Mother Ache, Healing the Wounded Daughter Within, and that's coming out May 5th. And so you can also pre-order that. And my publisher is Sentient Publications, which they focus on spiritual books. But they've got it on Amazon and all the places that sell books.
Great. Well, this interview should be coming out just in time to support the release of both of those books.
Oh, I appreciate it so much. Thank you so much for having me here. My first podcast, and it was actually quite fun. So,
well, good. I would hope that it would be fun. And just for the listening audience, your website is Deva Arani, so DevaArani.com. And of course, I will have a link in the podcast notes where you can just go directly there. And you have opportunities for people to book calls with you and have integration sessions. And just thank you so much for all that you've shared today. Yeah. And it's been a pleasure to host you for your first interview. And I hope it's the first of many more to come for you in support of your books and your ongoing work.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, thank you for having me. And thank you for all that you're putting out there. I've really enjoyed listening to some of your podcasts, and I was reading some of your book introductions, and I thought, wow, creativity and vitality and spirit, really a generous offering that you're putting out there. So thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Meaningful. Yeah. And the music too. So, and the art. Yeah. Good for you.
Yeah. So. Well, thank you for commenting on all that. I appreciate it. Well, yeah. I'm going to go ahead and let you go. Enjoy the rest of your day there in the mountains of Colorado, and maybe speak with you again somewhere down the road as things continue to develop. Because, it's been 18 years doing this podcast, and I hope to do it for another 18. So repeat guests are always welcome.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Okay. Take care.
Okay. Bye-bye.